Welcome to Madison City Channel's Know Your Candidate interviews, co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Dane County. I'm your interviewer, Shel Gross, and I would like to introduce Mike Baer, who is running for State Assembly in District 80. As we begin, I would like you to give an opening statement as to the educational, vocational, and civic experience you have which qualifies you for this office and why you are running for the State Assembly.
Well, thank you, Shel, and thank you for the work you and the league are doing to help introduce voters to their elected officials and those campaigning for it. I appreciate that opportunity. Yes, I'm Mike Baer. I'm a progressive Democrat running for re-election to the 80th Assembly District. I started my career working as a longtime aide to U.S. Senator Russ Feingold, and after that, I was for 12 years a public policy advocate, focusing on poverty and all of its adjacent issues like homelessness and hunger and others. I served on the Verona City Council. I was elected twice to the Dane County Board. And 2 years ago, I won a five-way primary for State Assembly after working hard to get out and meet voters, and was very proud of the effort and the results there. In the Assembly, I've been a champion for working families and issues important to the 80th District here, like housing. And I've spent the past few months knocking on doors again, talking to voters face to face. And by far, the number one issue is people see our state government as dysfunctional right now. There's a common refrain of just get something done, please, anything, just do something to help us. And they don't feel heard or represented, and they haven't been. The legislature was gerrymandered to draw them, literally draw them out of their representative democracy and devalue their voice and their power. So thanks to winning back control of the state Supreme Court and Governor Evers, we've got new maps, and that gives me hope that us Democrats can get into the majority, make progress on issues that we care about. We know the people of Wisconsin care about, like Medicaid expansion and workers' rights and investing in our communities. And so, now the work sort of turns to we've got to win elections and prove to voters once we win that we can get things done for them. And that's what they've been begging us to do. And I'm very excited to be part of that work. And I hope to return to the Assembly and earn that privilege from the voters of the 80th Assembly District.
Thank you. Is there any process you believe the Wisconsin legislature should put into place now for redistricting after the next national census?
Yeah, I think we've set a bit of a dangerous precedent, and maybe it's not a new precedent, but we pass new maps between the census cycles. And it's still the case that whoever's in charge draws the maps, and that leaves us open to being gerrymandered again, which is, what I just mentioned. Voters very clearly sent a message over and over that they don't want to be gerrymandered. So there are other states who have done this successfully. We have examples from right here in Wisconsin of how to redraw districts at the county level. I was a member of the county board when we redrew districts with a nonpartisan commission that made a recommendation, and the board only got to say yes or no to their recommendations. And the result was, yeah, there were incumbents who were drawn together, but there were also more seats and districts available that were majority minority voters. So it became more representative and reflective of the community. And I think people respected that process and respect the outcome as well. The outcome that we have today from the process we have on the books isn't something that voters respect or want to be repeated. So we really need to amend our state constitution and create a process that does every time create fair maps that are reflective of the state, that have districts that are compact, that keep communities of interest together, that ensure we are complying with the Federal Voting Rights Act, and ensuring that the outcome, again, is fair. Fairness is what should be the first test of our maps. And if there's a party that has some major advantage, as they've had in the past few years, those are maps that should be thrown out, that shouldn't have been put in the first place. So we know what to do. It's going to take some time to get there, and voters are going to have to be patient. And it's going to take bipartisan work to get to that point of passing resolutions through the Assembly and the Senate in 2 successive terms to amend the Constitution, and then have voters approve that.
What issues, if any, do you think you could work on effectively in a bipartisan manner in the next session?
Well, I can point to one specific that is already in process. I've been working with a Republican colleague on a bill to create what we're calling WIS-EARNS, which is a state facilitated retirement program for workers whose employers don't offer that kind of a program or that kind of a benefit. And we're doing that work across the aisle and have been, and it's based on work that was done as part of a task force a few years ago that was bipartisan. And I think from the outside, there's a perspective, and it's a justified one, that the parties inside the Capitol can't work together. But I think we've reflected over the past few years that every bill that gets passed and signed by the governor is bipartisan in nature, and so those don't get a lot of attention. A lot of them are sort of small and not transformational. They make incremental progress, and they're important for the people that they affect. But they're not. They don't necessarily follow the narrative that everything is dysfunctional that I've been talking about. So there are opportunities to work together. That's one example, and I think there are others. Housing has been one where we made a $500 million investment in workforce housing over the past 2 years, and there are certainly all across the state needs for improving people's stability in housing, their security in housing, their ability to move from an apartment to a single family home if they want to, or if they can afford to. A lot of questions on housing, a lot of questions about the justice system, a lot of questions about education. And all of these things I think need to be tackled first and foremost in a bipartisan way.
What role, if any, do you think the legislature should have in addressing conditions in Wisconsin's state prisons?
Oh, it absolutely has a role. I think, as does the justice system. Every judge who's sending someone to one of these places ought to be thinking about this. We have a justice system that is broken in so many ways. It's heartbreaking reading the news lately about the conditions in our system. It's dramatically in need of transformation, and it's just not producing the results that any of us should be proud of. The justice system we have was founded on the twin pillars of white supremacy and classism, and it's still functioning on those pillars today. We have a broken, underfunded, overburdened correction system, and it's something that we have to invest in. We have to find a better way. We need not just new buildings, but a whole new system to go with it. So we ought to be investing in alternatives to incarceration that we know work, that have been tested in other states, that have been tested at the local level. And we ought to be working to reform truth in sentencing and stop doing so many crimeless revocations. These are both issues that the legislature could tackle as well. And we really must invest in people who are leaving incarceration from the 36 prisons and institutions across the state. They're coming back to our communities, and we need to set them up for success, and we're not doing that today. So all of that takes investment. All of that takes bipartisan work in the legislature, and a willing administration to put those items into the budget and execute them in a way that we hope that voters will be proud of, because what we have today is just not something we should be proud of at all.
What role do you think the state legislature has in ensuring successful outcomes for all students, including those with disabilities?
Well, the students with disabilities, this is something close to my heart. I have a sister with a disability. And when she was growing up, she went to a separate institutionalized, segregated school for people with disabilities. And so, we can look at successes today and say things are certainly better off for students with disabilities than they were 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. But the outcomes aren't necessarily reflective of the full dream of what we want and the full right that those students have under the federal IDEA Act. And so we have to invest in students. One thing we ought to do is relieve the burden of funding for special education from local school boards. They currently pay 70%. The state pays around 30%, and those percents fluctuate a few percent here and there, but that's roughly the breakdown. And what that means is that districts that are smaller have a hole blown in their budget, and by one student who may be more resource heavy than others. So what we ought to do is fund all special education at 100% by the state, and that creates at least an equal opportunity at a good outcome. and doesn't pit students against each other when the school board is making its budget to try to determine, where does the dollars get spent and where doesn't it get spent. And so there's a number of other things we need to continue looking at, like seclusion and restraint in schools and safety of students with disabilities in schools. And the number one thing that I've heard from Verona High School students, from Middleton High School students here in the 80th district, is student mental health. And while separate from disability, oftentimes connected, but we are simply not investing enough in services for those students who survived the pandemic, who are facing a whole new world with social media and pressures that we don't want them to have to face alone. So that all takes investments and something we desperately need to be focused on.
Are there any steps you believe the legislature should take to further address mental health and substance abuse disorders?
Yeah, well, starting in schools is certainly one of them. Wisconsin has a proud history of drinking. We have an alcohol culture that, just doesn't serve our public health well. And we've seen the ravages of the opioid epidemic over the past few years. And there are a number of things that we ought to be doing better. The HOPE agenda, while helpful, didn't really meet the magnitude of the problem of substance abuse in this state. And so we have to invest more. I know of a number of Democratic colleagues who are working hard on this. Senator Baldwin at the federal level has been a great partner on this issue. We've set up communities to not have the resources locally that they need to be successful in fighting substance use and have community-based mental health resources, community-based substance use resources available to them, and sort of demand far outpacing the need. There are other things that we could look at that other states have been successful with. Legalizing marijuana has been proven to lower opioid overdose deaths as well, or at least connected to it. So there are things that we ought to be looking at that we're not today. And to our own detriment, unfortunately, to the public health detriment of our state.
What other priorities do you have for your term in office?
Well, I think the number one is we have to defend our democracy. Donald Trump and his allies, his minions here in Wisconsin, have been very successful at eroding people's confidence in our democratic institutions. And that includes Congress and the justice system and the legislature, things that we've talked about here. We ought to be, as Democrats, as pro-democracy as we can possibly be. That means expanding access to voting, doing universal voter registration, voting by mail, bringing back ballot drop boxes, a long list of things to make engaging in democracy much easier than it is today. And second, we have to be concerned about restoring our rights. Abortion rights were taken away. Reproductive health care and contraception are under attack. Our trans rights and LGBTQ plus rights constantly under attack. First Amendment rights are being trampled on by the Second Amendment, rights to free speech and assembly without sort of fear of gun violence. Our rights to a public education under attack. Voting rights, again, just being chipped away at. So, I think people's expectation and history shows that rights expand over time, but we haven't been seeing that in the more recent past. And I think that's deeply disturbing to me and voters as well. And then third, we have to make investments in our community. That means having good, strong public education from pre-kindergarten to grade school through high school, and then beyond into community college, technical college, and higher education. Childcare, constant thing that I hear about from parents who are struggling with those costs and access problems. Healthcare, of course, an issue that just doesn't seem to go away. Taking care of our environment and making sure that we are, have drinking water that is safe from wells and rivers that are polluted with PFAS and chemicals and things that we don't even understand at the moment, but we're trying to understand better. And there's just so many more things. The investments in our community is something that I talk a lot about with voters on all of these issues. And I think with new maps and hope at a Democratic majority that we can certainly make some progress on those.
What would you like to say to the viewing audience as we complete this interview?
Well, thank you, Shell, and the League for the work that you do, again, helping voters be connected with their elected officials and those who are running. I appreciate this opportunity. I've also appreciated the opportunity to be a member of the State Assembly for the past 2 years. Proud of the accomplishments that we've gotten done. Number one being protecting the governor's veto of some really bad bills. I think the hope and opportunity that the new maps bring for progress on issues that voters care about here in the 80th district is something that I can feel, that I hope voters can feel, and I hope voters are excited about, that they get engaged in and go vote, help a local candidate, help someone running for office, and be part of this exciting time. We really do have an opportunity to win some elections and prove to voters that democratic values, progressive values are on the rise, and that progress is possible on issues that we care about.
I want to thank Mike for speaking with us and thank the viewing audience for taking the time to know your candidates. I want to remind everyone that primary election day is Tuesday, August 13th, and the general election is Tuesday, November 5th. Every election is important. Please vote. On behalf of Madison City Channel and the League of Women Voters of Dane County, I thank you for joining us.